it's this month leading up to the elections. Reverend Christina and I have been working a lot on what we wanted to convey and what we wanted our Sunday experience to be like. And initially we thought there's so much craziness in the world right now that what we want to create is a kind of a sanctuary where people can step back and refresh their souls and renew their souls. And I'm having some second thoughts about that approach. Certainly, I hope that through the prayer and the music and the community that you always experience that when you come to be together with us on a Sunday. But I'm also cognizant and mindful that this is a time in history, a time in space, when if ever soul work and spiritual work was crucial for the transformation of the weird energies that are going on, it's now. So in some ways, I almost feel like the shift for me happened. Here's where the shift for me happened. The region, Unity Great Lakes region, had a conference a couple of weeks ago. And the opening keynote was presented by Reverend Jim Lee and his wife, Lisa. Both incredibly powerful people. Reverend Jim is black. He was African American at Unity Renaissance, which was the largest, one of the most diverse ministries in the movement for a long, long time. He's now retired and moved out west. But as he talked through his own kind of personal evolution through this process, it just really shifted my notion about what it means for us to be in community together at this time. And I was mindful that even as we were singing I Release, a few moments ago, certainly there are energies that would be toxic for us to hold on to. But I also think that can also be a dodge for us. There are times when it's like, oh, this is too much work, this is too painful, I'm not going to do the work, no, I release it, I'm just going to turn around, forget it's not there. There's like that kind of duck. The fancy term for it is spiritual bypassing, right? When there's work for us to do, there's transformation and growth before us, but we just are reluctant or resistant or for whatever reason don't step up to it. Now is a time in history when we need to be stepping up. Our understanding of how spirit works in the universe, our capacity for inner knowing and recognizing the divinity with us, and recognizing that in really embracing oneness, it means we also have to embrace the other. That is more needed now, and our ability to practice that and live more deeply into it is, I think, probably has more potential for creating transformative change than ever, at least in our lifetimes, maybe than we've experienced or ever will. So I'm going to challenge us, rather than sort of comfort and create sanctuary. I'm going to tell you up front that what I'm going to speak to today might actually be a little bit uncomfortable. And yet, I think the way that we refresh and renew our souls is to dive more deeply into the spiritual dimension of life, rather than to shrink from the challenges that lie before us. Does that make sense? I've seen some nodding heads, and I'm happy about that. I haven't seen anybody log off yet, so I'm good with that. So here's where the turning point came. When Lisa, Reverend Lee's wife, was synopsizing all that had come up during their opening thing, she said one of the places that it changed most for her was when she was able to sort of embrace the notion that we have been born into the, in Unity often you'll log into a service and we'll say, it's no accident you're here, it's a divine appointment, you're here. She's taken that to like next level. It's no accident that we're here on the planet, that we are the ones, this is the generation that's called to be present for what's happening now in the world. And I don't even have to list those, we all know it, right? It's no accident that it's us who are here. We're the ones who are called into position to be able to move through it in a way that transforms it, rather than just sort of sweeps it under the rug, or and by transform, I mean transforms at a level in consciousness, right? Because we know social and cultural change can kind of happen, and we can write laws to change things, but it never really does, because we haven't really come at it from that deepest level where there's a collective consciousness that supports the kind of world that works for all, right? So this is our opportunity to take that deeper than it's ever been before, and to really shift consciousness and culture in a way that the kind of change where justice, social justice, and where respect for other and a really truly inclusive and dynamic and diverse world starts to come forth. That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be about in these moments. So Lisa's observation that, like, that's my deepest purpose in the moment. Like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to be an agent for that kind of transformation. And recognizing that, it sort of gives me a context to look at all of the headlines that are really, literally, daily, they're different. Daily, there's a new crisis. To be able to hold that as a bunch of noise and yet recognize that my purpose here is to be able to not release that, but really face up to it and be present to it in a way that I can bring the truest part of me, the divine of me, the loving part of me to bear, so that I'm changed in my own consciousness and can show up for others in that same way, right? So the most compelling example that Jim Lee brought forth in their opening session was his description of how his recognition that even in the death of George Floyd, it was up to Jim Lee to even be able to see that he could not be separate and apart from the cop who murdered him. That's a big chunk, right? To be able to look at the other that is so clearly in violation of any principle or value that we might hold, and recognize that, man, that other is stuck too. They're stuck in a paradigm that keeps their believing present, that motivates their actions in a way that's not different from the prisons that I impose upon myself, my own structure of beliefs that would keep me from recognizing that there might be part of my understanding that really hasn't fully grasped the infinite and the divine, right? Our job is to see beyond the separation pieces right now and find a way to integrate it all. Because it is, if as we believe in unity that it's one, then it is all of God. And it's up to us to sort of bring and call that forth and recognize that there's truly no separation. So biblical example that I'm going to hold, I have an object lesson, and I practice really hard to try and do this seamlessly, but I may have to do a little bit adjusting. I have a painting here. It's of a biblical figure. I'm going to try and hold it up so you can see the whole painting and get a better sense of who's there. If I move it to the left and up over the logo there. So this painting actually, I think, was painted by a friend of Rose and Bob Johnson's. And I love it. So there's water there at the bottom, you see, and there are crowds on the banks, and there's even fire in the background. So the figure in the middle is John the Baptist. Don't you love that beautiful depiction? So hold that picture in mind now while I read you the biblical passage that we're going to be working with here. This is out of Mark 10. And John the Baptist is declaring, "I baptize you with water for repentance. But after me comes one who is more powerful than I, whose sandals I am not worthy to carry. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand, and he will clear his threshing floor, gathering his wheat into the barn and burning up the chaff with unquenchable fire." I just want you to see that again. See the reference to the unquenchable fire. And I love it. This is really an impactful image for me. But what I recognize in that is that John the Baptist has some expectations, some beliefs about how Jesus, this one who's coming after him, is going to show up, right? Unquenchable fire, thrashing floor. It's the brimstone, it's the Baptist fire and brimstone kind of attitude. That's how he sees the coming of Jesus, right? And in fact, if we follow John the Baptist's story down the road, he's later imprisoned for his strident and probably well-deserved criticism of the king for marrying someone he shouldn't have, right? So John the Baptist is in prison and probably at that point really questioning if this is all worth it. Like, really, okay, how is this vision that I have going to be coming forth? And what we learn is that he starts to question whether Jesus was really the guy or not. And he sends messengers to go ask Jesus specifically, What is it? What is that you're about? Should I have been looking for somebody else? Because clearly you're not doing the fire and the forks thing that I was expecting. You see, his framework is this. But look, when we hear Jesus' response, he never speaks to John the Baptist's expectation, right? Jesus' response to the messengers that John had sent to him is this: "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight. The lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." So those who would otherwise be sort of oppressed, those who are lame, those who would be ignored, those are the ones for whom Jesus has come. There's no threshing happening. There's no brimstone and fire. That's not how Jesus is showing up. And so John the Baptist, it's actually that the rigidity of that kind of vision, that kind of thinking that got him in trouble in the first place. In the next chapter, we learn that his plate is served up on a head, in some ways out of his own inability to be present to other dimensions and other points of view. That's kind of a big leap, but I'm taking it. That's what I'm saying. And so I would suggest that within us are those same kind of attitudes. We have that John the Baptist, this is the expectation I hold. This is how the kingdom of heaven looks. This is how my leaders ought to be showing up. This is the way it needs to be happening. That's getting in the way of us recognizing that that in itself is our cage, right? That's our prison. God asks us to be available to be unconditionally loving, to demonstrate the kind of acceptance and the kind of receptivity and the kind of compassion that Jesus brought. So I would just ask you to think about it. Like, as you move into those places where you just want to turn the TV off, and I'm not saying you have to leave the TV on, but know that that inclination to shut it down and release it, no, I'm not going there, that's actually getting in the way of our own soul's growth and development, right? It's us not being resilient enough to be present to our own pain and discomfort. And what is called for now is a greater capacity to be present to those so that we can continue to make connections with those we might otherwise regard as otherwise regard as, I'm not thinking of the right word, so I'm going to skip it. So our work is really about, first, finding those places in our own self, in our own beingness, and our own belief systems that are limiting our capacity to be loving in the presence of others. That's the deepest work there is. That's the space where we really, as we open to it, as we're willing to be present to it, that it's only through the transformative power of the divine that we can really begin to be healed and begin to accept what our true work is in this wild time, right? I want to share with you, this is from a Zen mystic who is just an incredibly insightful kind of observer of how the world is moving. I would really regard her as a prophet. So Angel Kaido Williams is her name. And what she suggests is that in order for us to be transformed as individuals, we have to allow for the incompleteness of any of our truths, any of the things that we hold most true, to recognize that in the infinite, even that is a limit, right? We're limiting ourselves even in what we value the most and the greatest, and to be forgiving of the complexity of the whole human experience, and to be able to really begin to recognize that even though there are others who are perpetuating these systems of oppression who are advantaged by that, right? There's advantage to being in that position. But for us to be able to recognize that at the deepest level of our humanity, they too are suffering, right? We might not be able to see or spot it, but if we trust the deepest dimension of our human hearts, we know that level of disconnection that would prompt or incentivize or even allow you to be able to act in ways that are so detrimental to humanity. and so detrimental to the expression of love that they have to be so cut off from their truest self that there's a dimension of suffering that's our connection point, right? That's where we can begin to recognize that suffering is also universal, and that for us to be able to hold compassion in those spaces is actually the beginning of a transformative power that goes far beyond whatever law we might be able to sign in with a pen, or whatever protests we might be able to win, or whatever election we prevail in, right? Because the change has to happen at a much deeper level if it's to be sustained. So, it's just interesting. As Christine and I were talking about this series, what we were wanting to do is create a refuge so that once we got to the election, then we could be accepting of whatever the result was. I think it's beyond that, though, because this work continues. The ways in which we imprison ourselves in our own expectations and our own insistence about how it ought to be and our own self-righteousness, just as John the Baptist had, those are prisons for our own capacity for being loving. So it's this is our opportunity, right? Not to shrink from, not to release in a way that's spiritually bypassing and ducking the issue, but to be present to the places in our own heart so that we can allow that to expand, and we can allow our capacity to be present to other in a way that increases our effectiveness. There are, I've been listening a lot to, and maybe that would be my coaching. Like, in order to do that, we have to be able to start feeding our souls with other ideas and images than we're going to get from mainstream or social media or news headlines right now. So I would invite you to seek out alternative ways of holding these energies, right? And there are a lot of them. There are so many wonderful podcasts. Krista Tippett's On Being is amazing. I don't know how to tell you to get to this other than to subscribe to Cloud Cult's Patreon page. So if you've got some money to spend, I would highly recommend it. But they're doing some amazing work. In fact, that's where the inspiration for today's talk really came out of a recent seminar that was done with the University of Minneapolis or Minnesota. And it was a recognition that in order to make the changes, the planetary changes that we need, beyond social and cultural, even to what's happening with the earth and the environment, that's all a part of the work that we're doing right now in consciousness. It's all the same. And to be able for us to recognize that, the bar that we've set for ourselves to this point has been way too low. We are far more powerful than we recognize. We are far more loving and capable to embrace the fullness of life's experience and the complexity of humanity than we have given ourselves or challenged ourselves to do prior to this. We are miracles expressing, right? We are miracles in the process of becoming even greater miracles. And so I invite you to just think about how it is that you can move through this and keep your heart open, not only to like the love and the comfort and the sanctuary of being at peace, but how can you be open so that you are the presence of those energies, even when your sense of self-righteousness and your personal values are being threatened or challenged, or we feel that they're being threatened and challenged. Because as we build resilience around those, it actually increases the capacity for the energies of love to be expressed more fully on the planet and in the world. That's the work that we're about. It's not just getting our candidate elected in November. It's about changing consciousness so that whomever is elected, there's a cultural shift and a change in consciousness that is going to be sustained far beyond whatever happens in the worldly material form. Yeah? Oh man, so I told you this wasn't going to be about sit back and relax and we're going to make you peaceful and comfortable at heart. I warned you up front. But I think we're up to it. I believe that's what we're about. We've been doing it at Unity on the North Shore in our lives individually for a while. We've been challenging what our sense or what our beliefs are about money and lack and abundance. We've done that. We've got I can't count the number of examples of people who have followed their heart and pursued their dreams and changed careers so that they could live into that greater belief. We've been doing that work for a while inside our walls, and now we're called to do that work in a greater way as we continue to evolve our own understanding, but as we begin to share it more fully out in the world and in the planet. Yeah? So I don't know what the heck I'm going to do in terms of a meditation after this, but we're going to move into meditation, and we'll see where Spirit leads us. Megan, if you would set the tone and
Ooh,
set the energy.
thank you so much. To come to you without my list of all life's knots I can't untwist, but just to be here in your midst is all I really need. And to sit here quietly loving you, you loving me in the silence, in the peace is all I need to be. Hallelujah.
And so now as we move into a time of deeper reflection, I invite you to just get comfortable. Scan your body for any areas of tension or tightness and just let that go. And with 3 deep breaths, I just invite you to be very aware of each breath, the fullness of the breath as it fills your chest, and the contraction of your belly as you exhale. And it's in this availability to Spirit that we're most able to recognize that truly there is much to be grateful for, much to be able to claim, Alleluia. That the power of God's love is evident at much deeper levels than anything happening in the world of form. And that that same power is the motivating energy that moves us through life. It's the power that supports every breath we take. It's the power that gives us the strength to be present when we might feel challenged or threatened. It's the power that truly helps us to develop a capacity for love and compassion and forgiveness. And so in this time of quiet reflection and meditation, I invite you to consider that your life is miraculous, that you indeed are a miracle. Bringing forth a greater expression of light and love, dispelling darkness, challenging any notion of otherness, and being a compassionate presence that actually is the very essence of all out of which we have been created. You are a miracle. With the strength to transform your own consciousness, and with assurance that in that transformation there is greater good being done. So as we prepare now to move into a brief time of silence, I invite you to just be fully present to whatever is bubbling within you right now, without dwelling on any particular thought or any one emotion. Just allow it to flow through you, knowing and trusting that it's exactly the process that miracle making requires. You are a miracle. Let it be so as we rest in silence. And as we bring this time of meditation to a close, we give thanks. Thanks for our awareness that there is a deeper dimension to life that is based in love. Thanks for the strength that allows us to grow at a soul level. And thanks for the love that connects us and supports us that we might do this work together. As we truly move into a space for fully embodying the divine in our lives, that it might express more fully in this world. So it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
To come to you without my list of all life's knots I can't untwist, but just to be here in your midst is all I really need. And to sit here quietly, loving you, you loving me, in the silence, in the peace, is all I need to be.
Hey, thanks for watching this YouTube video. If Unity's message of positive spiritual living resonates with you, I hope you'll subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date on other lessons as we post them. Also, if you're able to support us financially in the work that we do in the world, please check below for contact information. You can visit our website, find more about what programming we offer, as well as how to give. Blessings.